Welcome to our webinar on Intrinsic Motivation and Learning, brought to you by Grand Canyon University and the team at Canyon Professional Development. My name is Marnie Landry, and I'd like to welcome and introduce you to our guest today, Dr. Lee Jenkins, the author of How to Create a Perfect School. That's a pretty lofty book name if you ask me. So we always like to ask our guests if they have a quote that they'd like to start with, or sometimes we'll have an inspirational quote. And Dr. Jenkins chose this one: beat the Jenkins curve. Lee, what are you talking about here?
Okay. Well, you're going to see in a couple of minutes a graph of the loss of enthusiasm. Children starting in kindergarten, according to 3,000 teachers, with 95% or more loving school, and each year fewer and fewer and fewer love school. You'll see that graph in a couple of minutes. Well, John Hattie, who's well known to educators, called that graph the Jenkins Curve. And his advice is beat it. Now, if you were perfect, the Jenkins Curve would not exist. The motivation that children bring with them to kindergarten would be maintained all the way through 12th grade. There it is. But you can see, according to the teachers, 90% of the kids love school in grade 1. In grade 2, it goes down to 82%, and it gets worse and worse and worse every year. Sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking, well, the elementary teachers keep enthusiasm high, the kids love it, but then they lose that enthusiasm in middle school and high school, and that's not true.
Sure, it sounds like us high school teachers are really the mean bad ones, right? Look, it dips right where we teach.
Yeah, but that's because, you don't really notice it in 3rd grade when almost all the kids still love school. But you notice it when you got over half of them don't love school, when you get to middle school and high school. So then we blame the middle school and high school, and it's not there. It's everybody. It's the same system causing that loss of intrinsic motivation.
You know, before we go forward, it was interesting. I was reading your book. You said that same system, and you asked a question in your book that said, who's in control of the ship getting to their destination? And if you asked people, most of them would say the crew, right? The captain.
Right.
But
so the question is, who's in charge of a ship crossing the ocean? It's a Deming question. And we guess the captain and all, navigator and all those. No, it's the person who designed the ship. So who has the most control over education? It's not the teachers, it's not the administrators, it's not the legislature. It's the people that designed education. And nobody alive today designed chapter tests that kids get to cram and forget. Nobody there today designed that system that causes the Jenkins curve. We all inherited it. We can do something about it, but we inherited something. Just for example, teachers are told from Education 101 on, their jobs to motivate the kids to learn. That's terrible advice. They're not to motivate them to learn. They came to us already motivated. Our job's to maintain what they bring with us. They were born motivated. They came to kindergarten motivated. Let's keep it.
so, how have we been motivating them recently?
Well, we've been motivating them mainly with bribes, basically. That's what it is. 10 incentives a day, 180 days, 13 years. Unless you've got a pre-K that makes it 14 years, that's 23,000 incentives. I just did a workshop last week, and I asked the people in the audience to say, well, how many incentives are there in your school per day? Multiply it out. And when I said, if you had over 20,000 incentives in your school system, stand up, a bunch of people stood up. Then I said, if you have 15,000, then more stood up. If you have 10,000, stand up. It's crazy. I mean, think about it. If you're doing it 20,000 times and it's not working, the kids hate school more and more the longer they're in school. Something's wrong.
Yeah, but what if everything was right?
No, it's not. It's not. This is us. Like, what in the world do I do? So let's think about that. This teacher here has 3 assets. All of us have 3 assets: power, personality, and knowledge. That's it. So this teacher found out that his personality is not working. The kids are not behaving and cooperating because he's got such a wonderful personality that his wife loves. Okay, it's not working. So then you say, well, then if personality is not working, what's next? Well, knowledge. Well, I don't have enough knowledge to get them to love school. So what's left? Power. And what do you do with power? 20,000 incentives.
Oh, sure.
That's
And
what we do.
yeah, and what if the students stayed enthused all the way through 12th grade? Could we even keep up with that at this point?
No, no. I interviewed 3 people within the last 6 months who did keep their motivation all the way through to grade 12. So some do. It's people tell me it's between 5 and 10% to keep that motivation all the way through to 12th grade. So some do. But if all of them did, the complaint of teachers would not be, how do I motivate them? The complaint would be, good grief, I can't keep up with all these kids want to learn. They want to learn so much, there's no time to prepare for all they want to learn. Wouldn't that be a good problem?
And that's we as a teacher who's taught remedial classes, regular level classes, advanced classes, sometimes the problem you run into teaching an advanced or an AP class is that the students actually do turn in all of their work. Doesn't indicate that they're actually learning, but they're turning it all in, and then as a teacher you can't keep up with that. So now you've got all this work, they're all playing the game correctly, and you still can't keep up.
Right.
Right.
I've asked a lot of people in high school, by the way, about turning in the work. What percent of the work is copied? And the answer I consistently get is 90%.
Oh my goodness.
So we've got to figure out a way for teachers to stop spending their evening grading copied homework.
Absolutely. That really ties into another webinar that we hosted about less is more. How do you reduce the workload but still have effective learning going on? So that's a whole nother topic. We'll get to that.
Whole other topic.
Yeah.
But this is what a student wrote in first grade. Said this is a rainbow that they didn't know how to make a bend. And sometimes I think this is a student's picture that matches the teacher picture you showed on the last slide. Like, how in the world am I going to maintain intrinsic motivation? I've not heard anybody ever talk about how to do it. There are some teachers with their personality, it seems like they're doing it, but then the next year, it doesn't last because that teacher's gone.
Sure, because it doesn't really seem to go along with the system, the one you were speaking about, the system that was invented before all of us were born. And I can attest to that as a longtime classroom teacher and someone who designs professional development for teachers and administrators. The topics that are really in high demand are things like student engagement, classroom management, social emotional learning, assessment. I have all these words. These don't sound like the words you're using. How are they related? Are they related?
They're related. But you see, when you maintain intrinsic motivation, the needs for many of those go away. Okay? So you don't have to deal with them separately. When data is not a source of pain, but data is a source of great joy. And every day students experience joy from the data. The needs of those diminish, not completely. They're still, but see, these are common problems. There'll still be some special ones with individual kids, but it won't be the biggest common problem that it is now. Those 4, we can solve those 4 issues, and the last slide we'll talk a little bit about the formative assessment that actually does a lot to solve the other 3.
Sure. Now you're talking about this thing, intrinsic motivation. I don't have a test for that. Nobody's given me a multiple choice test to give my students. It is not on the state exams. Oh my goodness, that's kind of it's invisible, and especially as a scientist and a science teacher, I struggle with that. How do we measure this invisible thing?
Okay.
Why measure it?
I'll tell you how, and it
Okay.
is visible. The kids know. The kids have to tell us. In kindergarten and first grade, second grade, the parents could probably come pretty close. But beyond that, it's going to have to be directly from the students.
Okay.
And John Hattie gave us the triplets: skill, will, and thrill. So that's what we're after, skill, will, and thrill. So based on his influence, I created the will and thrill matrix. It is for measuring students' effort, the will, and their joy from the learning. Not the joy because the teacher brought donuts, no, the joy because of the learning. It was so exciting to learn this, okay? So we ask kids, if you look at the will to learn, they'll tell us whether they're not trying at all, they're in the middle, they're coasting, or whether they're all in.
All right.
On the thrill of learning.
I have to challenge you there really quick, though. What's to say that students will be honest? I mean,
Okay.
why aren't they going to lie about that?
Hey, some will, okay, but it's anonymous.
Okay.
And we find from its actual being in classrooms that they do tell us the truth because it's anonymous. Now, there are ways to find out, and I described that in the book, how to find out if they're really telling us the truth. There's a way to check it out, okay? But for this, it is a good tool for the teacher to have a picture of where the kids are. Now, if you took that and passed it around the room, I don't think you'd get accurate information with each kid putting the dot on as it came to them, because they're going to look at the other dots.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
So I don't think you would. But when you'll see here, the next slide, I think it is, we have miniatures of those. Well, there's what it looks like when we get a picture of a class. Okay, that's the picture. And the teacher can see, there we are. There's what I'm facing. It's a great thing to do the first week of school, to say, tell me what it was like last year, to know where you are. And teachers will do this every month or sometimes every quarter to get a sense of where we are. So if I'm not teaching kindergarten and my only job is to maintain what they come in with, but I'm teaching grade 8, then I want to, instead of motivating the kids, I want to try to restore the motivation they once had in kindergarten. That's a different mindset. I'm going to try to put you back the way you used to be. The kid walks into 8th grade science and says, I hate science.
And as a science teacher, I heard that all the time.
Yeah. And the teacher can say, that's interesting. Well, when did you decide to hate science? The kid says, I always hated science. Say, well, that's actually not true. You liked everything in kindergarten. So tell me, when did you start hating science? And they tell you their story. And you say, I'm really sorry that happened to you in grade whatever it was. I can't do anything about that. But what I can do now is the two of us will work together to try to restore the love of science you were born with and you brought with you to kindergarten. We're going to work together to do that. You're going to tell me what I can do better to help you work harder and to enjoy the science. And I'm going to listen, and we're going to work together as a team to put you back the way you used to be. That's a completely different mindset than I'm going to bribe you to do these assignments. And if you do these assignments, then you get the trinket. Okay.
What I did hear you say a few moments ago was, the teacher might do this at the beginning of the month and at the beginning of the quarter. So I think one important thing is repetition here. It's not a one-time, there's no value in the one-time snapshot.
No.
Right? Okay.
Because we want to see, and you'll see a slide later, we want to see the pattern. Is my effort working? Are we getting better in our intrinsic motivation?
Okay, but now you're really speaking to the heart of teacher challenges, time. We don't have time.
Time is with you.
We can't even get through the curriculum we have to get through. I'm sure none of the other teachers out there have this problem, but I always got to the last month of school and had to cram together a giant unit because I ran out of time. So how?
Okay, so in order to gain the time, we have enough time. Okay, it's what it's being used in. It's been used in review. Typical teachers tell me that they will start off the year with 4 to 6 weeks of review of the prior years. That's a waste of time. And in fact, I asked the same 3,000 teachers that gave me the information for the Jenkins Curve when I said, what grade level do you teach and what percent of your kids love school? I asked them, what percent of the year are you spending teaching kids content they should already know? The average from 3,000 teachers is 1/3 of the year. 1/3 of the year. teachers who have worked with me on the LTJ process, and you'll see a graph on that at the end, I'll ask them, because it takes away the permission to forget. They actually have to remember. And I'll say to these teachers, well, how long did you spend getting ready for the state test? And they'll think a minute and they'll say, I think I spent 5 minutes getting ready for the state test. Okay. So if you're not wasting time getting ready for the state test, and you're not wasting time reteaching things they've already taught in prior grade levels, we have all kinds of time. And really, what do we want to use that time for? More deep learning. I want the surface learning remembered. It's in their long-term memory, so that when we give them deep assignments, they can quickly reach into their mind and pull out the surface learning that's necessary to solve the deep problem. But if the surface learning was never learned, it was only for the chapter test, then when you give the deep assignment, they don't remember it.
Right. And I have to admit to our audience, of course, most of my questions are very, oppositional, adversarial questions. I bought into Dr. Jenkins' methods quite a long time ago, and I used to do a lot of quizzes using his L to J method. Exactly, they didn't have a excuse to forget. I didn't know what content would come every week. They didn't know. So it was kind of us against the content, not me punishing the students with a quiz. And I probably took more time than was needed to do it, but I really enjoyed the process, and the students loved and hated the process. And this kind of, you can explain how to use these, but you teach the students how to collect the data, and especially for STEM, for STEM teaching, these skills are really important: how to collect data, how to make sure your data is accurate, how to compile data, how to analyze data. So I was really using your method to teach those skills while also pulling them together as a team to learn the content. So here's a tool that you've developed for teachers. So
okay, now on my website, which comes up later, you'll see it.
Yeah.
If you look under resources and then go to perfect, there's information there for every chapter in the book, additional information. And what we're talking about now about measuring intrinsic motivation, the will and fill chart is chapter 3. So if you go to lblj.com and then resources, then look under perfect, hit chapter 3. There's a copy of chapter 3 there. You can read it, no cost to you. You can read it about everything we're talking about today. And then there's forms, and one is all of the will and thrill matrices, mini ones, little bitty ones. So you cut that up, and each kid gets a little bitty one. That's probably, 5 centimeters by 3. It's just very small. And each kid puts one dot on it. We gather all those dots up, all those papers up, those little mini ones, give them to 2 kids. One reads the data and one puts it on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And that's how you get the full chart. So there you can see in the upper right corner, you can see some fingers and the student holding the minis. And that student reading off the one dot, information from one dot. And the student in the big picture is putting the dots where they go. And so that is the way that we record all this information. The kids do the work. The teacher doesn't need to be bothered. They need to know how to do the work. So that's where all the information is. The big graph, the small graphs, all of them are all there on my website, free of charge for you to use.
And don't worry, everyone, about if you were trying to catch those. We will have all of the links and information in our show notes below. So we'll have all of that for you. And I just really liked what you were saying about the students dealing with the data and collecting the data. And I find that when students do that, they have ownership of it. And so when we would do our L to J quizzes and the data didn't match, we did not move forward in class. We had to stop, find out where the error was, and go back and fix the data. Because if I'm teaching science, I'm teaching scientific thought, there's no use in collecting data if there's inaccuracy. So it was a really good tool for me, and I liked teaching that.
I love hearing that, Marnie. That's wonderful. Yes, has to be accurate.
Yes, it has to be accurate. So also as a scientist and a teacher who needs to submit data, you've got a way for us to quantify this.
Yes, so quantifying the intrinsic motivation. In the lower left corner, we said if a student says, I hate it and I'm not trying at all, that's a 1 point. And then you see the diagonals. Just go, so the first diagonal is 2 and 2, and then the next diagonal is 3, 3 and 3, until you get to the upper right corner. And that's where the student says, I love it and I'm all in. That's 9 points. So the students calculate the average score in the classroom. Students do that work, not the teacher. They do that. And then you're going to see what it looks like in a classroom. This is from a middle school classroom in Phoenix. And you'll see how that every month we've got the average for the class, so the teacher can see, am I doing it? Are we improving on their intrinsic motivation?
I'll show you that in 2 slides. We have this actual student feedback next. But yeah, and I like it because the students can also see growth over time, or
yes,
decrease over time. And then we can start to ask why.
Okay, so then let's look at the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, so this form is also on the chapter 3 data. It's the will and throw feedback. Because what do we do to improve intrinsic? Well, one of the ways is with our ears. We listen. We listen to the kids and say, this helped me work harder. In other words, keep doing that, teacher. And here's an idea that might help us work harder. And then on the other side, this helped me really enjoy learning more. Keep doing it. And this is an idea that might help us. So when a teacher gets that from every student in the class, it's very important for the teacher to say, kids, there's a bunch of you and there's one of me. So here's what I promise you. I will read every one of your feedbacks. Then I promise you I'll do my very best to implement 1 or 2 of the ideas that you gave. And when I implement an idea that came from the students, I will tell you, this came from one of the students. That's why we're doing this now. We'll see if we like it. It might be that one student really thinks this is a good idea and everybody else hates it. Well, I don't know. We'll find out, right? I don't know. But I am listening to you, and this is an idea, and we'll see. So that's what we're doing as kind of hypotheses to test. Let's see if we did these ideas that the students give us, if it would increase their intrinsic motivation. We don't know. We'll find out.
I like that. And I like that it's a low risk way, especially for a teacher who hasn't asked for student feedback a lot or is a little nervous about it. It's kind of a private way to get it, and it's a kind of a safe way for them to find one to try. I was always out in the open, bring it on. What don't you like? Let's fix it. So, but you have to kind of develop a thick skin over time to be able to do that, I think. So I think this is a great way to start.
And the mistake you make, if you don't introduce it the way I said, the mistake is every student thinks you're going to implement their idea.
Yes.
And the teacher cannot do that. It's too much.
That is really important.
Okay. So here is the average in a middle school class in Phoenix. And you can see that there's the average each month. It'll go along the way. The star there indicates an all-time best. In other words, that was our best score so far. And then you see another one, and you see another one at the end. So, and it's not like it's a perfect curve going up and up and up and up and up. No, there's ups and downs and things that happen in the school, but it gives us a sense of, are we doing better? At the very least, the teacher's not making it worse. when you look at the Jenkins curve getting worse every year, intrinsic motivation getting worse every year, at the very least, I'm not making it worse. I'm not adding to the problem.
It was always a rough semester when I gave my pre and post tests, and every once in a while a student would score lower on the post test. I'm like, how did I take knowledge out of you?
Yes. Right.
So, I think what this really comes down to, you talked early on about our system of education, and it was invented by people who are no longer around, and that it does seem to really set up these 2 classes of students. You're either a winner or a loser at doing school. That's sad.
Yes, Jack Canfield just interviewed me. It's on my website. He's the one that did Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and we talked about it. He said, when I was in school, I was in military school, and after every exam, they put the top score in the room and the name of the kid, then the next score and the name of the kid, next score and name of the kid, next score and name of the kid. And we think, oh boy, sure glad we don't do it that way now. No, we still do. It's just it's fancier now. It's a big, huge bulletin board. One I often show is a picture of a football field, and every kid has their own personal helmet. And so you see instantly when you walk in the room, which kids are near the goal line and which kids haven't even gotten to the 1 yard line yet. You see instantly who the winners and losers are. It's and it's not like we do it on purpose. The teachers who put these graphs together put a lot of time in it, and they think they're going to motivate all the kids to learn. Well, they do motivate a bunch of them, but
Yeah.
not all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any teacher in my career that ever went in thinking I'm looking at these as who's going to win and who's going to lose.
They're
But
not.
we don't, and so we do it with unconscious bias, which is the scarier thing. Where if we're just not even conscious that this is what we're creating, we really need to look internally here.
So the knowledge that's needed is how to use data for great joy.
Using data for great joy. That brings out the data nerd in me. I love it. So, your book is about perfection.
Okay?
You and I know we're not perfect,
And we're not going to be.
and we're not going to be. So why are you talking about this perfection then?
Okay. So in any strategic planning, any just organizing yourself or with others, the first step is, what would perfect be? Then you say, we will never be perfect. Then step 3 is, well, where are we now? And you limit your brainstorming to what would move us closer to perfect, knowing we're not going to get there. But if you never know what perfect is, then we're just the grab bag of ideas, whatever's current in vogue. And that drives teachers crazy because it changes every year,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Changes every year. So if we said, what would perfect be? And then we continuously work to get closer and closer and closer, we would actually keep a whole lot more of our teachers, great teachers, in the classroom, because it's not changing every year. Because if we don't know what perfect is, then you could just change your mind every year for whatever's popular at the moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's take school discipline. That's an easy one. What would perfect be? No referrals to the office for the whole year for discipline. That'd be perfect. Okay, we're not going to be perfect. Where are we now? Well, we've got the records. We know how many referrals we've had the last couple of years. About the same every year. Now, what can we do to get closer? It's a simple idea for planning.
Sure. And I think that's important too, thinking about that from a student perspective too, redefining perfect as opposed to how it's been defined in the past. 100% on a test doesn't necessarily mean perfect. It means you could take the test and answer all the questions right. So I think
Yes.
that kind of takes, it's not just teaching, it's really about the learning and the learner.
And if you look at another one of John Hattie's triplets, was to surface, deep, to transfer learning. It has to include all 3 in our definition of perfect student. Yeah. Here's a class run chart. This is powerful. Not only do students graph their own progress, but we add up the total for the whole classroom. They're a team. If you were to look at the research, the graphs that show personal growth, personal best, that would be what you'd look under for research. What's the research on personal best? If you want to look at the total for whole class, you look under the research for collective efficacy. And this is a picture of collective efficacy. It means that we know what we're doing as a class of art students, and we know what worked, and we know how to do it again, and we know how to get better. And then you see the little decal things that are on there, rubber stamp. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the class had their all-time best. What I would say about this chart is it makes visible learning, it makes growth mindset visible. And then there's a celebration when the kids have an all-time best. So it's audible and it is thrilling. So growth mindset is great theory, great research. We need to put it in practice. But in order for it to go into practice in our classrooms, it's got to be visible, audible, and thrilling. And it is.
Perfect. And I have to say, I stand behind your words completely, because that's exactly how we did it in my class. When they got an all-time high, they saw it, they got to graph it out in the hallway so everybody else could see it, and then they got to celebrate in any way they wanted, and it was always very exciting. So again, Dr. Jenkins, I am so happy you joined us today. Dr. Jenkins' website is up on our screen, www.lbellj.com. And all of his website and the links will be in our show notes. So please don't worry about trying to find those or trying to, review backwards and find them. Just want to remind you why our department is here. Canyon Professional Development. We're here to empower, educate, and inspire our community, which is you, so that you are able to take action and fulfill your purpose and serve others. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to another great webinar.
Thank you, Marnie. It's been a joy to be with you. It
Thank
really
you.
has. I'm so pleased with what you're doing for not only for the Phoenix area and the rest of Arizona, but for the country. It's amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. For everyone out there, please remember to subscribe for more free PD on our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.